welcome. And thank you, Maclean, too, for the music. That was great. Allow me to share my screen right now, and then we can start. Just give me a few moments. Yeah.
No problem. You are welcome once again as you are settling in. We are grateful to have you today.
So can you see my screen? I don't know if you really...
Yes, we can.
What are you looking at? Is
I'm
it just...
looking at it. Yeah, it's the screen is not yet on,
Okay.
but
I
we
am
can see
sharing on
you.
my side, but can you see that now?
For myself,
Okay,
not
yeah,
really.
the screen is on,
Yes, we are
but we are
seeing. Yeah,
looking at the one soon.
we are very fine now. We can see with the
All right.
three.
Thank you
Yes.
so much for confirming that, and welcome everyone. I will continue as we go through the presentation. I'll introduce myself more because the nature of this topic is basically based on personal lived experiences, and so that allows me to share more about who I am and the various experiences as they relate to the topic today. So before I actually also continue, I want to thank Faith for reaching out to me. She even suggested the topic. So I appreciate that opportunity to allow me to come share my own experiences here. So our topic today, as it says, raising children in a different culture. So what we are going to cover today in this topic, I'll have a brief introduction of myself. We are going to look at culture and parenting. And then there's this notion of TCKs, which is the third culture kid. And then we'll compare norms, and then a few inspiration from the scripture. So brief introduction about who I am. Like you have heard earlier, my name is Agatha Asiimwe. I am married to Dr. Michael Muzoora. I been married, by the way, for the last 18 years. I am a mother of three, two teenagers and one kid, like they mentioned. So I have two girls and one boy. So my eldest is 17. Then I have a 14-year-old and I have a 9-year-old girl. The 14-year-old is a boy. I am also a doctoral student, coming up towards the end of my doctoral program. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that by the end of the next year, I should be done with this program. At the same time, I work full-time. I have a full-time job, 8 hours a week, every day, Monday to Friday. So that gives you an idea of exactly who I am. But as I engage in some of the topics, some of the discussions ahead, we'll learn to know more about who I am too. So moving on, we cannot talk about this topic without understanding what culture and parenting are. So culture is a way of life of a group of people. The behaviors, symbols, values, and beliefs that people accept, not really thinking about them sometimes, by the way, and are passed on mostly through communication, imitation from one generation to another. This is the whole notion of knowing that for us in my culture, we do things this way. We will cook matoke this way, or comparing how someone else will cook the same matoke and you're like, no, that's not how we do it. That is, for example, one little easier example of how it goes. And then parenting is the process of raising and educating a child from birth to adulthood. And normally these two go hand in hand because culture, these beliefs, the values that we actually are initiated in, that we have grown up believing in, that we know are the same values that we are going to like introduce our kids to. What actually appeals to us positively is what we are going to introduce our children to. And I actually noted appealing to us positively, but sometimes it's not always the case. What may be, I may think a certain value is positive on my side, but another person may view it as not a positive way. But I mean, at the end of the day, you as a parent, what you feel is the best for your child, sometimes you may think it is positive, or sometimes we may take on some of these virtues, not knowing that they are not the best, but we would go on and impart them as we in children as they grow up, not knowing that actually they may not be positive on the other hand, or they may be negative, but it's what we know. So you do what you know best and what you have grown up doing and what you know is the best for your team. So the rest of the world will be there to judge accordingly. And again, sometimes, depending on what it is that we believe in, we may let the rest stand by and make their judgments, but we can continue on our road of guiding our young ones the way we best feel is the best for us as a team. Then moving on again around culture and parenting. So parenting styles, I sort of touched that, normally differ due to culture, personality, parental background, education level, socioeconomic status, family size, and religion. And this is where I want to say a little more about my own growing up. I was brought up in a Christian family, and some of these things I want to say, it is after you have become an adult that you appreciate the way you were brought up. So there's a lot of values that I have carried on that have helped me navigate life because I learned these values as a young child. So because I have been brought up that way, so when it was my time to bring up my own kids, I will borrow a leaf from what I know and have appreciated growing up. And this may vary, of course, with a different person. And I want to also say, depending on our exposure level, education-wise, we will tend to parent differently. And maybe, and this will come up later as you navigate different cultures. So I currently live in Washington State, in the USA, but I have lived and studied in Norway as a young single girl, and then moved to Uganda, where I got married. I met my husband, by the way, in Norway, went back to Uganda where I got married and started a family in Uganda. And at the age when my kids were about 5 years, that's the eldest at the time, I had two. And my second born was 2 years. We moved to Australia. My husband was moving to study for his PhD. And so we moved to Australia. We were in Australia as a family for 1 year and maybe close to a half, and then moved to the US. So now Uganda, Australia, US are all different. And here is this Ugandan brought up girl trying to raise a family in Australia. But this aspect of the educational level sometimes, so you borrow certain aspects that you have met along the way in your education to navigate some of these experiences. So I got to in Australia, and life can be totally different, challenging. The first part of it, me as a mother, navigating the system was, how am I going to manage? In Uganda, we're used to breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, supper, all those three like layered systems of making food. But then most of the times we had house help. So you are in a foreign country, you're on your own. How do you navigate every other aspect of day-to-day life on your own? So it was overwhelming to start with, but then I had to consult. I remembered I had friends in various states abroad that I knew had children and had lived for a while. So there's some little things that you will not really realize are tough. So now I had to consult. So how do you do it? Are you making meals all these times a day? and so then I also got to learn actually like the various different meals that normally are considered major. So breakfast is a big one, and then you have dinner. So lunch is just something small. You don't have really to go all the way in. So with me comparing notes with my friends, I was able to adjust a little bit, and that reduced on that anxiety, being tired at the end of it all, and you're like, wow, will I manage? And I am saying I am doing that as a parent. Of course, it is not single-handedly, but remember, in everything you're doing in your home, the kids are watching. They are watching how you navigate all these things. And sometimes you think they are too busy, but they are listening. You normally will prove these later on in life. And I want to let me continue. Let me not just be taken up with the lived experiences, but let me continue. So the concept of the third culture kid. So a third culture kid is a person who has spent a significant part of his or her developmental years outside their parents' culture. The third culture kid builds relationships to all the cultures while not having full ownership in any. Now, like I mentioned earlier, much as I am a Ugandan brought up, lived in Uganda most of my life, my kids belong to this category. I cannot fully discuss this topic without understanding who a third culture kid is. And so this is so important for me as I navigate this topic, because over time, we have adjusted accordingly because of the concept of the third culture kid. But I have one little video ahead. We can talk more about the third culture kid after you listen briefly to this short video that we are going to be sharing. I hope it will come through okay. And sorry for the
Protect your
adverts. I had
family's
nothing
dreams
to
under
do
our
about
roof.
this.
American Family
I will skip
Insurance.
it as soon as
Gen Studio for Performance Marketing solves a challenge that marketers have been facing for a long time.
Have you ever heard of third culture kids? That's what they call people like me, having dual national identities, but feeling alienated from both of them. I was born in Japan and lived there until I began school. I loved life in Japan and thought it would be like this forever. But I was wrong. I was only 7 when my parents and I moved to France. I was too little to understand where France was, and couldn't conceive another culture that wasn't Japanese. I had to go to a French school where I couldn't understand anybody, and I made no friends. I just couldn't fit in. Though I adapted quickly, life never got easy for me. On my 8th birthday, I invited my classmates to my birthday party. I was ready for a happy birthday celebration, but I found I had to be brave asking them to take their shoes off before entering the house, which is what Japanese people do. Shortly after, when I went to my friend's birthday party, I noticed his dad asleep on his bed with his shoes on. I thought that was so strange. Then I realized that courtesies are very different all around the world. Sometimes I used to walk down the street and older students would call out chinois, which is French for Chinese. At first, I didn't really understand, so it was okay. But as I grew older, I heard it more and more. I never got used to hearing people identifying me as Asian, like they were trying to cast me out of their society, separating me from them. I began to feel sorry for myself and resented my Asian face. Maybe having blonde hair and blue eyes might help me fit in their cliques. I didn't realize at the time that it really didn't matter. So I worked very hard to immerse myself in the local culture. I learned to speak with a thick and authentic local accent, and people said it was good. They told me that I spoke with a thick southwestern French accent. But I never felt like I truly fit in, despite this acknowledgement. The psychological dilemma from childhood only seemed to grow worse. It just always lingered in the back of my mind. Eventually, I started proudly proclaiming myself Japanese and fell in love with the culture, which became one of my comfort zones. I still felt torn between France and Japan, and I really felt like I was having a serious kind of identity crisis. This is the reason why, after living abroad for so long, I decided to go back to Japan and finally thought I could settle down into one culture and just be normal. But I was wrong again. People couldn't accept me as Japanese. They expected me to be authentically Japanese from the way I look. But once they saw I was foreign and different, I felt them grow cold and separate from me. It made me feel like no matter where I go, I will never fit in. Then it struck me. Why not celebrate being a third culture kid?
Yeah, so I'm going to stop that video right there. Later I can share the link and you can always go through the rest of it. But more about that video. I'm sorry, I've already shared the next slide, but let me talk more about this video. So the video introduces to you to what the third culture kid goes through. I am a Ugandan, like I said, Munyankore. Though the beginning part of my raising a family, I lived in Mukono, and so I had a maid who was a Muganda mostly. So basically, even if I really wanted to keep, especially the language aspect of my being a Munyankore, the kids were picking up the Luganda. Multilingualism is a positive thing. I embrace that, but that wasn't a bigger change. So when we moved. So now the kids pick up, at the time we moved, they were younger, 5 years. So much as 5 years and 2 years, much as they picked some bit of our cultural concepts as Ugandans and Anyankore at large, these fade away with time. So right now, when you are interacting with them, they are proud to be Ugandans, but it's not much they can associate with being Ugandan. And you'll find that you will make the authentic Ugandan meal and it is not appealing to them. So what do you do? So I want to say that, there are these aspects of parenting that we know that we just the way we have been brought up and the way we have admired parenting that we pick up that really do also stick with us. But it is important to understand where you are, where your kids are, especially if you are in a situation like this, where, the kids are neither fully in either of the cultures, you learn to be really like flexible and go with the flow. For example, I do like hosting. And so when I host, most times I have a wide spread of food. But one of the reasons I have this wide spread of food when I host is that I really feel like I have to provide for the needs of each one, because I am thinking about my visitors. Most of the visitors I host will be, especially if I'm hosting the Ugandan visitors, I am going to think about my Ugandan local food. But then again, my kids, it's the eldest that can try the authentic Ugandan food. So then what do? I have to be able to add extras to make sure that each one is provided for. So, and these little things that we do, and usually I normally will include them in all this preparation. They pick on it, they learn. And if I'm not there tomorrow, they also continue those aspects. And when it comes to actually hosting, I want to bring up the concept of how I have watched this growing up. So when we were younger kids, growing up at home, I was impressed by how my grandmom, especially on my mom's side, was really this welcoming, like she was so hospitable. So each time we visited, passed by, there was always, especially when you talk to an African, a Ugandan at large, hosting involves, food. So we always knew we would have to, there's food. In fact, at one time, there's times I would hear my dad telling my mom that they shouldn't alert my grandmom that we were passing by, because so she doesn't have to prepare. But even then, we're like, okay, we come pass by, because we would first go to my grandparents' house, and then we continue to my other grandparent on my dad's side. But it's the same route. We would come back and pass by and maybe stop briefly. And because we did, and she would not be happy that she wasn't alerted, but because she knows we are going to pass back again, by the time we pass back, there's really all lots of, food prepared for us to have. So, and I have watched how my mom took on that aspect too. You not come home, there's always something special for the visitor. You have to offer something at least. So, and I have watched how we have taken that aspect too. As older adults, I will not have to question if I am going to visit my sister. I know there's going to be, the last thing I have to question is that I know I'm going to be really taken care of. So now we have watched. It's not like my mom would say that you have to do this way. No. We watched as they did what they did. And now as you become independent, you actually pick up a leaf from what you watched as you were growing up. So there's a lot of things around parenting. Some of the things we have to really redirect, guide our children directly, but most of the parenting styles, it's what we do. How are we able to navigate different experiences? So the kids are watching, and sometimes we think they're not getting it. But I think for me personally, from observing how my own life has gone, I just think that the kids get it. So let's not really worry so much and get frustrated. And especially we like to be so conscious, and worried about how everything is going. Anyway, let's move on. Comparing norms is this next slide that we have in front of us. We are comparing here is comparing the Ugandan context and the American context. In Uganda, it takes a village. And it takes a village I am wanting to hope that everyone understands what this is about. But this is the notion of where your neighbor would see your child doing something wrong and they step in to redirect this child or guide the child accordingly. That's not how it works in the American context. Your child is your responsibility. Even if they see the child doing wrong, actually the best they can do is call the police, something like that, but they are not going to say anything. Of course, they will call the police. It depends upon what is being done, but there are some things that you can redirect the child accordingly, but that's not how it is in the American context. And we have mostly, and I want to also remember to say that I am using examples from when I was in Uganda. The world evolves so drastically that sometimes even when we have left and not been there for long, we think things are still the same as we left, and yet it changes. So, but I know mostly education is boarding schools. In the American context, it's mostly day schools, except for university level. And now that is a positive and a negative. You know, kids will quickly learn to be independent. So I'm not going to use my own judgment of who I was growing up to really like be so on my kids to make sure that, you know, they're able to do A, B, C, D. I just have to guide them accordingly, knowing that they have with me most of the time, and they tend to be self-reliant on, you know, mom and dad is home. So that is very key. I always remind myself, you know, it is automatic that sometimes we tend to want to judge our kids and, you know, guide them according to what we knew was best appeal to us, and forget that their context is a little bit different. So Ugandan context, there's also this notion of strict discipline. And the strict discipline can be a little bit straightforward, blunt, and, you know, you're telling the child to do A or B, including the spanking part. That is different in the American context. It has to be an ongoing communication between the parents and children. Like if a Ugandan parent would listen to me sometimes negotiating, you almost want to lose the patience, and you're like, what is she doing, you know? But here, there's lots of laws around, they call it child abuse. So sometimes the way you talk with the kids, the way you discipline the kids matters. So, but of course, it's been a learning curve. I want to share one example around discipline one time. And I like to keep on evaluating myself. So one time, the kid's grandma, one of my kids' grandma, was talking to my kid and asked, so of course when they talk, they're wanting to ask if they know Runyankore, if they speak what they know in Runyankore. So asked, can you tell me a word in Runyankore? And so my daughter went on to say, Inza kwate chitini inza kutera. So for those of you who don't quite understand this, it is, I'm going to get hold of that stick and I'm going to hit you. So that used to be a common phrase when they were younger, me trying to redirect them from A, B, C, and I'm like, you know, I'm not going to do it, but I'm threatening them in that way. But now, hearing the child say that, I'm like, oh, okay, means this has been too much. I've been actually using this so much. And like, if this was to be heard in the American context, that is like child abuse. So, but it is really a work in progress for a parent caught up in two different cultures. It is challenging that you have to keep on correcting yourself here and there. Yeah. So when we move on to the education, Ugandan context, mostly, I know in the times that I grew up, it was always left to the teachers. The teachers will guide you through everything. They're also in charge of discipline. Whereas in the American context, this is, it's a parent and family involvement. It is purely like kids will go to school, the expectation is that the parents should come in and volunteer. The parents should be in, like when the child comes home, you're supposed to be like going through, revising, like being up to date with how everything is going. So these are two different things. In the Ugandan context, it is like the teachers have it. In fact, you wait at the end of the term to use the reports to evaluate where you are at. But again, it's also a work in progress in the American context for a Ugandan mom, and how you are in America determines how involved you are. So you, at the end of the day, you figure out ways to help your child in ways that are really positive and meaningful to your family. You're not going to cut yourself in pieces, because American families have prepared themselves for childbearing. They have saved lots of money for when the kid starts to go to school. So you'll find one parent is purely set to take care of the kids. But in our context, immigrant families, we have to work, all of us, and figure out ways to make things work for the best of the family. Then in the religious context, you find Uganda schools embrace also religion in schools. And in the American context, that is a home thing. The religion concept, you have to bring it in at home, in the norms at home and out of school, because school is supposed to be like open for all and embracing everyone. So moving on, inspiration from the scripture as we carry on this parenting role. And this is a verse, this is from Psalm 127, verses 3-5. Children are a heritage from God, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. So as we carry on this role, we have to remember that they are a heritage from God, and in all we do, take care of them as our precious gifts. So even as we relate, as we do whatever we do, we need to catch ourselves and be careful how we do it, making sure that, you know how you will honor that gift. So that is what this speaks to me. I don't know how you interpret it on your side. And then Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, train a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not turn from it. That's very self-explanatory, and I have a short story about this. I know growing up, one thing, we're expected to be at home, not really late. By 7, you have to be home. So I got, when I left to Norway to do my master's, you can imagine I was away from home, away from my parents, but each time it became dark, I was always like, I felt a little bit conscious about myself, like something was happening. And I remembered that whole thing. And so that's only just one minor example, but there are several that can really apply in this context. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This is quite a challenging journey, but they that trust in God will always make it in the end. So read those, if you do read the Bible, and there's lots of encouragement, even when you feel like you are not actually where it should be, you are encouraged to keep on going. And, in the first place, you remember that, this is God that has assigned you this duty. So, and you're like, well, I can make it. So you're down today, tomorrow, because of that trust and belief and, getting into the scripture, you're encouraged to keep going. And then Lamentations 3:22 to 23. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. We are not perfect all the time. Sometimes we get it wrong. All it takes to do is, say you're sorry and getting to understand where you erred. And it's just a conversation of remembering that, God is for us all, and no matter where you made it wrong, just ask for forgiveness. There's always a new start. And that new start, we need to extend the same leaf as we work with our children, where they err, where we think that everything has failed. No, let's not be so hard on ourselves, be hard on them. Let's remember that love of God that has always been with us. He has never let us down. So let us extend that same leaf in our parenting style. And our final verse today is from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. So sometimes it can get so challenging, but we are entrusted by God to do this, to be the role models for our kids. So let us not fear to confront certain aspects as we meet them in this journey. We just have to remember that we can make it. Yeah. So thank you. That marks the end. It's a lot. This is a wide topic, and it's really quite challenging for one to know where exactly to hit, but that marks the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing and see. I haven't been seeing the comments in the chat if there are any questions. So in case of anything, we can continue the discussion right now.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you, Agatha Border. I think you can guess Border. For Agatha, she knows. Thank you so much. No wonder you are that product. We are so, so humbled to have you today. I don't want to spoil the sweet meal. You have given it all. Now it is time for comments, questions, or some additions if there are any. As we are waiting for the questions, allow me to add mine. Myself, I stayed in Kenya for 12 years, and my children were young. So you have reminded me of those days whereby you'll find you have language challenges and you don't have a common language to use, where you are saying zakwate chitakutere, meaning those were the few words you would use. So at times it's quite challenging, whereby you can even fail to get a communicating language, a vernacular. So it is a challenge, but as you have reminded us that with trusting the word of God from Timothy, we should not fear, but we should try to see how we can guide them. So members, this is the time. You can raise your hand, you can ask in the chat room. You are welcome. Time for questions, and we are running out of time. Thank you so much. In the chat room, I'm seeing thanks. Not seeing questions. Members, you can raise your hands and then we
I
pick on
see a
you.
question from
Yes.
Ixon. What happens where your child is taken up by the Western culture and despises yours? I don't want to use the word despise. So the thing is, we have to really, I have moved to this country and brought my kid with me. They came when they were younger. So what do you expect? In fact, I had a conversation with my kids and I normally discuss with them freely. And this is what what you will hear them say. One of them, by the last one, was born here. And it is hard to tell her that she is Ugandan. She'll tell you she's an American. But my son, who was 2 years, because she left much early, will, genuinely speaking, knows this culture. There's no way he will associate with the Ugandan culture more. But it is up to me as a parent to really be quite flexible and understand that you brought the child to here. What do you expect? Because there's not much. Just like I accepted the fact that when they were even younger, I living in Mukono, these kids were picking up Luganda at a fast rate, as opposed to my local language, Runyankore, even if I spoke Runyankore at home. So we just have to be accepting, but continue on to introduce them to our own culture, values. They will pick what they can pick. So that's my take on that. So if a child refuses, there are several questions I can see. There is, if a child refuses.
Before you go on, actually correct Brother Dixon. It is not despising, but this is what they have grown to see. This is what they know. If anything, in this case, if one doesn't handle it properly, it may be you despising their culture because it is what they know. Over to you, Agatha.
Yeah, thank you. Let me move on to the next. There was one, if a child refuses to, I think, go for prayers with you as a parent and treat it as a violation of his right, how do you manage such? You know, as parents, we have to know that we are stewards. And at what point is this? There is a point where I am in charge. And I need to also know the reason why this child is refusing the prayers. How am I introducing prayer to the child? How am I using it? Sometimes the way you introduce it, even if they are our kids, the approach matters. Let's not approach it in a way like we are really forcing them into something. And sometimes you also have to understand that they are not also so good experiences at church. So is it a negative experience they may have experienced at this church? Maybe I need, this time when I go, I need to get to the bottom of the reason why they are talking like that, especially when they're at a certain age. For me, beyond a certain age, like now my 17-year-old, I've done my best that I could. So I have to loosen up a little bit. It is hard. We still want to be in charge, but we have to trust that we have done a good job and want to let go a little bit and see how they are faring with what you have entrusted them and taught them all these years. Not sure if that is satisfactory, but let us move on. There's another question from Eliab. I'm sorry, my network was on and off. I don't know if you could have handled it. Do you feel that there are some elements of your home culture that you are missing, e.g. language? How have you tried to inculcate such elements? Yes, it is inevitable to miss certain concepts. You see, you are just like a drop in the sea. So sometimes culture is not it's not you only as an individual that will help with promoting culture in the lives of these kids. It's also who is around them. So language has been a struggle for me personally. We speak the Runyankore at home. My kids, the elder two, will not, they understand what we are talking. You can't talk about them, but they will respond in English. The little one still struggles, and sometimes I will tease her. I will say the statements, and she'll be like, "What are you talking?" So I mean, it is, and again, we are where we are because of realities in life. We are working. So sometimes, even if it's us and them, and we even don't have third parties, so it's not enough time to go hand in hand, and we are teaching them. But because we speak it, at least they are able to learn and pick some bits and pieces. Then there's another question. Why do we call our children kids? Is it biblical? That's an interesting question. I am not so well qualified to talk so much about the Bible. If we have someone who has all the bits and pieces about the Bible, they can help me with that. Let me see. There's a point. We have to be flexible and understand that their lived culture is American and our lived culture is predominantly Ugandan. Thank you so much for that contribution, Gertrude. And I think that's all I can see in the chat. Thank you so much for being very active in the chat, and let's keep the conversation going. And there's another comment. Let us keep asking God to teach our children. Otherwise, different cultures gonna influence them. God have mercy. Of course, yes, we have to keep on praying and commit them to God. But also what you do, as you do your best that you can as a parent. And just like that verse says, that teach them what they should learn, and then they will not depart from it. So at the end of it all, you the main role model, you're the first person they trust, you're the first teacher. So what you do as a parent, what you role model at home sticks with them. That's the best way I can do. Well, that's what I can do best to guide my kids. Then there's a point from Annette. It is also important to pray for this child who doesn't want to go to church. My experience with one of our children is I wanted to insist on going to church. And this child said, "Mom, this is an individual choice." I resorted to prayer and the situation changed. Yeah, you can never go wrong with prayer. Thank you so much, Annette. I think that's all that I see. I promised to share the link for the other video in the chat. I can put that on before we close, but I appreciate everyone coming in here and participating in this presentation today. Oh, there is another final comment. I think we also have no time with them. Ugandan education system also. Yeah, that's a great point too. Of course, we are out of time. I don't want to push on, but that is a great point. There's a difference. You know, we rely on having maids at home. And here we have been, because I want to tell you, there's an option for taking a child to daycare, also having nannies, but all those options are expensive. And because they are expensive, us as a family have come up with ways of being creative and making sure there has to be one at home. In the beginning, we actually we were working different shifts. So when I am at work, maybe at night, my husband is at home. If he's at work, I am at home. So that helped us to be the only ones around the kids. And then you get a chance to interact and, guide them accordingly. So that is important. Being in the kids' life is really important. You can still have maids help, but find time to really be in your children's lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Agatha. Once again, we are indeed blessed. Yeah, we have seen monkey see, monkey do. Because you have told us that action speaks a lot, much as they don't tell us. And we have to note the aspects we have in life when we are young have an effect on us. So that is a takeaway home to go with. And then again, to keep on redirecting them. Thank you, thank you. We are humbled. It was very insightful talk. Members, at this time, let me ask